You don't pray enough. You should fast beyond Ramadan, the Sunnah on Mondays and Thursdays. That's halal, that's haram as well. Don't post yourself on this or that social network. Again, more haram, don't do that. Don't watch this, don't listen to that. Definitely, don't read that book. Arab Muslims sometimes feel weighed down by guilt, that they're not doing enough within their faith, or that they're doing something wrong. Does faith then feel like a cradle or a cage? This tension between ease and constraint has followed believers for centuries. Today we ask, was Islam meant to be easy? Or is it a faith that's meant to be burdensome? Or have tradition, culture, and social layering made it feel this way, heavy? We'll explore the core of the Qur'an and prophetic guidance, how traditions historically shaped religious expectations, and what social scientists say when they look at how people live Islam. By the end, you'll see that the heart of Islam whispers ease, but sometimes human history has gotten in the way, turned faith into something much more demanding. From the very beginning, the Qur'an positions religion not as an unbearable weight, but as guidance suited to human capacity. One of the most beautiful and often quoted verses is, Allah intends for you ease and does not intend hardship. This verse isn't isolated. It fits into a broader pattern. Another verse teaches us that Allah does not charge a soul except with that which is within its capacity. And elsewhere, the Qur'an says, there is no compulsion in religion. Think of that last line, no compulsion. It's an irrefutable affirmation that faith is meant to exist and live freely, through understanding and heartfelt commitment, and not through coercion or exhaustion. The divine message repeatedly is one of facilitation, an invitation to grow spiritually without being crushed by the weight of practice or blind restriction. This is the ethos of ease in the Qur'an. The Prophet Muhammad echoed this principle clearly. In one hadith, he said, "This religion is easy." He further taught, "The best of your religion is that which is easiest." These words aren't calls to laxity, rather they warn us against overburdening oneself to the point of feeling exhaustion or severe limitation. In the earliest Muslim community, moderation was a norm, not an afterthought. The Prophet discouraged extremes, encouraged balance, and regularly exemplified a middle path. Neither ascetic withdrawal from life nor fanatical self-flagellation in devotion. The Prophet's life embodied spiritual depth without overwhelm. That calls us to reflect. If simplicity was central to both scripture and prophetic practice, why does modern experience sometimes feel otherwise? To properly understand this, we must take a step into history and sociology. Right after the Prophet's lifetime, Muslim communities found themselves facing new questions: legal, cultural, social. To answer them, scholars developed fiqh, detailed legal frameworks that elaborated on worship, purity, transactions, modesty, family life, and more. Over centuries, these frameworks became rigified traditions, sometimes to the point where culturally rooted expectations appeared as if they were divine commandments or assimilated within prophetic example. This became more complex in classical Islamic societies because juristic systems, like the 4 Sunni madhabs, formalized intricate rules for everyday life. While their aim was guidance, over time, this also created patterns where cultural expectations became merged with religious obligations. Many things Muslims today hold as Islamic practices are products of social life and develop alongside communities, rather than being identical within the original religious text. This is a critical point. The religion itself intended ease and flexibility, but centuries of tradition shaped lived practices into tightly bound, perceived faith-driven social systems. I really do appreciate you taking the time and watching the Qur'anic Chronicles. Please do join our community by subscribing so that you don't miss out on any content regarding the Arab and Muslim history, identity, and modern condition. And if you really do enjoy the channel week in and week out and would like to support us even further, please do join us at our YouTube membership program as well as on Patreon. Thanks again. Let's look at several examples of how religion is made harder and more complex by societal traditions and norms. Take modesty, for instance. The Qur'an instructs both men and women to dress modestly. Tell the believing women to lower their gaze and guard their private parts and not expose their adornment except that which necessarily appears. Notice what the verse emphasizes: ethics of modesty, not exact garments. It provides principle, leaving room for ijtihad, interpretation, and context. Yet over time, different communities interpreted these instructions differently. The hijab, a headscarf covering the hair, is widely recognized as a cultural and religious marker of modesty. The niqab, covering the face, became normative in other societies, not explicitly required by scripture, but framed as a social expectation of piety and adherence to religious morality. So which one is the correct application in this equation? These choices illustrate a critical point. Scripture gave guidelines, but social and cultural norms solidified them into fixed practices. What started as ethical principles became ritualized markers of religious identity in certain regions. Another example is while the Qur'an outlines the 5 daily prayers and obligatory fasts during Ramadan, many Muslims experience additional rituals. Sunnah prayers, for example, Taraweeh during Ramadan, and extra fasts on Mondays and Thursdays, as near mandatory. These practices, though rooted in the Prophet's guidance, were never framed in Scripture as strict obligations. Rather, they were encouraged as voluntary acts of devotion. Yet over generations, these voluntary acts became culturally reinforced norms in many Arab societies. Children grew up hearing that a pious Muslim prays all Sunnah prayers, and social expectation often equates devotion with adherence to these extras. Anthropologically, this illustrates how society transforms encouraged practices into perceived religious duties. While the intention is spiritual excellence, the effect can be psychological pressure. A believer may feel guilt or inadequacy if unable to perform them consistently, even though Islam allows flexibility based on capacity. In this way, voluntary acts of worship, sunnah prayers, and extra fasts can acquire the weight of obligation through social reinforcement rather than scriptural mandate, reflecting the intersection of tradition, culture, and religious perception. And the last example is how over time, much detailed framework has introduced imposed limits on expression, influencing how Muslims perceive or experience things like music, dance, literature, and arts in general. While the Qur'an and Sunnah globally emphasize modesty, ethics, and proper conduct, they don't provide absolute prohibitions on artistic or cultural expression. Instead, much of the restriction comes from interpretive layers imposed by scholars and political authorities seeking textual legitimacy for social control. For example, music and dance in many Arab societies are often treated as potentially corrupting or distracting from devotion. Legal scholars have debated their permissibility for centuries, sometimes permitting, sometimes restricting, depending on context and intent. Yet in practice, political and religious authorities have frequently emphasized fear of sin rather than nuance, using selective Qur'anic verses or hadiths to justify prohibitions. The result is a climate where creative expression, reading literature, attending a musical performance, is viewed through a lens of caution and suspicion. This phenomenon is less about religious necessity than social and political enforcement. The rulings create a form of internalized discipline, where believers police themselves out of concern for piety or social approval, even when the Qur'an allows room for judgment and enjoyment within ethical limits. In essence, jurisprudence, when combined with politicized interpretations, can transform moral guidance into anxiety, restricting natural human engagement with culture and the arts, despite the fact that most of these expressions don't inherently conflict with Islamic ethics of modesty or propriety. If we look at the entire Islamic universe, set aside sectarian differences, Sunni, Shi'i, the denominations, the various jurisprudential schools, and ask what remains at the heart of Islam, a striking simplicity emerges. Stripped to its essentials, Islam is a framework of belief, practice, and ethical conduct grounded in a few foundational convictions. Belief centers on the oneness of God, the prophethood of Muhammad, the reality of the afterlife, and accountability for one's actions. Across sects, these convictions are non-negotiable, forming the spiritual backbone of Muslim identity. Practice at its core consists of regular prayer, fasting in Ramadan, charitable giving, and moral behavior that aligns with justice and compassion. Even voluntary acts like additional prayers, extra fasts, and other charitable methods are understood as supplementary, not the essence of faith. Behavior emphasizes humility, honesty, respect for others, and care for the vulnerable. The Qur'an repeatedly stresses mercy, moderation, and ethical living as non-sectarian principles. Indeed, Allah commands justice and good conduct and giving to relatives. When we distill Islam in this way, what remains isn't an overbearing, rigid set of rules, but a flexible ethical and spiritual system. It's a faith centered on intention, accountability, and ethical engagement with the world, capable of guiding life across cultures, eras, and individual circumstances. A core of clarity beneath centuries of interpretation, tradition, and social layering. Beyond this core system, the ways in which culture, tradition, and jurisprudence have imposed themselves onto practice are choices, not mandates. Each individual must decide where they stand, what resonates with their understanding, and how they wish to embody their faith. No external pressure, be it social, familial, or institutional, should dictate the depth or form of a person's devotion. I know it sounds ideal, but Islam is fundamentally between the believer and God, without intermediaries or hierarchies claiming exclusive authority over understanding or spiritual connection. God didn't reveal a cipher that's necessary to decode the Qur'an or the Islamic faith, nor did He appoint jurists as the rightful inheritors of that understanding. Guidance is available, but interpretation, practice, and internalization remain deeply personal. In the very end, Islam is meant to be easy. Faith isn't measured by the number of extracurricular rituals performed, nor by strict adherence to societal expectations. It's measured by sincerity, intention, and ethical engagement in life. Every believer has the right and responsibility to navigate their faith authentically, choosing which layers to embrace and which to question, while remaining true to the essential principles that Islam has revealed.